"You're just a puppet for Trump," the host sneered at Karoline Leavitt. But he didn't expect her response. In a clip that's now been viewed over 50 million times, Leavitt fired back, leaving the veteran host stammering. It was a moment that would shake the media landscape. The aftermath, sponsors pulling out, a network in crisis, and a liberal media icon fighting for his career. Was it an act of long overdue justice or a spark for cancel culture controversy? We break down the explosive interview that has America talking and ask, what really happened in that studio? The studio lights flared to life as Karoline Leavitt stepped onto the set. An air of tension filled the room as she walked into what felt like a gladiatorial arena. The host, a veteran of political sparring, sat behind his desk with a predatory smile. His reputation for eviscerating guests preceded him, and today, he had his sights set on the youngest White House press secretary in history. The cameras rolled, and the host wasted no time. His first question landed like a sucker punch, dripping with insinuation about her former boss. "Miss Leavitt, given Trump's recent legal troubles, do you still stand by your unwavering support for him?" The question hung in the air, a trap waiting to be sprung. But Leavitt was ready. Her response came measured and cool, facts rolling off her tongue with practiced ease. Beneath her calm exterior, a fire burned in her eyes. This wasn't just about defending a former president. It was about standing her ground against a media machine that had long ago abandoned objectivity. The host pressed harder, each question more pointed than the last. Leavitt countered with hard data and well-researched counterpoints. She wasn't here to play nice. She was here to shatter narratives. As Leavitt spoke, a subtle shift rippled through the studio. Crew members exchanged glances, eyebrows raised. This wasn't going according to the script. The young Republican wasn't crumbling under pressure. She was pushing back and pushing hard. The host's body language changed. He leaned forward, almost aggressive now, his carefully cultivated persona of neutrality slipping. His interruptions became more frequent, his tone more condescending. But Leavitt held firm, refusing to be rattled or rushed. Then came the moment that would change everything. As Leavitt delved into economic statistics that contradicted the host's narrative, he cut her off mid-sentence. "You're just parroting talking points, aren't you? I mean, do you even understand what you're saying?" The air in the studio froze. Time seemed to stand still as the weight of the insult sank in. It was a personal attack, laden with assumptions about her intelligence and capability. Leavitt's eyes narrowed, a mix of shock and anger flashing across her face. For a split second, the mask of professional composure slipped, revealing the raw emotion beneath. The crew held their breath. Producers in the control room leaned forward, suddenly alert. This was the kind of moment that could make or break careers, the kind of exchange that would be replayed and dissected for days to come. As the tension reached a fever pitch, Leavitt took a deep breath. The fire in her eyes blazed even brighter now, a determination setting in her jaw. She wasn't just going to respond, she was going to retaliate. And in that moment, everyone in the studio knew the real battle was about to begin. Leavitt's eyes locked onto the host's. His insult hung between them, a challenge thrown down in front of millions. Leavitt wasn't just picking it up. She was about to use it as a weapon. Taking a deep breath, Leavitt's press secretary training kicked in. This wasn't just another hostile interview. This was personal, and she was about to make it very public. "Parroting talking points?" Leavitt's voice cut through the studio air like a blade. "Let's talk about facts." The host's smug expression faltered. He wasn't prepared for this counterattack. Leavitt unleashed a barrage of statistics, her words precise and measured. She spoke of economic growth, foreign policy wins, promises kept. The host tried to interject, but Leavitt pressed on. She'd been silenced before, but not today. "You want to talk about bias?" Leavitt's eyes narrowed. "Let's discuss your show's history of leading questions that favor a particular narrative." The host's face reddened as Leavitt cited specific examples from past episodes. She was turning defense into offense. The studio fell silent. Even the cameramen were transfixed. This wasn't in the script. This was Leavitt, rewriting the rules in real time. "You claim to be a bastion of truth," Leavitt continued, her voice steady and cold. "But let's talk about your network's handling of my first press conference. You ran with a claim about $50 million in taxpayer dollars for condoms in Gaza. Did you bother to fact-check that before airing it?" The host opened his mouth, but Leavitt pressed on. "CNN, PolitiFact, The Washington Post, they all debunked that claim, but your network? You let it run, you let it spread, and now you have the audacity to accuse me of parroting talking points?" The host's face was a storm of emotions, anger, surprise, and a flicker of fear. He tried to regain control, but Leavitt wasn't finished. You want to talk about diversity in media? Leavitt's voice took on a new edge. During my time in the White House, I've pushed for independent journalists and influencers to have access to press conferences. I've fought to diversify media representation. But that doesn't fit your narrative, does it? The host fumbled for words, his usual eloquence deserting him. Leavitt saw her opening and took it. You claim to champion live fact-checking during political debates, she said, her tone almost conversational. But let's be honest, it's just another tool for pushing your agenda. Real-time verification? More like real-time manipulation. The studio was dead silent. Leavitt leaned forward, her gaze never leaving the host's face. I challenge you, she said, her voice low but clear. Fact-check my claims. Right here, right now, live on air. The host's eyes widened. This wasn't just off-script. This was dangerous territory. Or are you afraid of what your viewers might learn? Leavitt's challenge echoed through the studio. It wasn't just a question. It was a gauntlet thrown down at the feet of the entire media establishment. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone in the room could feel it. Leavitt sat back, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She'd come prepared for a fight, armed with facts and determination, and now she knew she'd won more than just this battle. The tension in the studio was palpable. Sweat glistened on the host's forehead as he realized he was losing control of his own show. Karoline Leavitt had matched him point for point, fact for fact. He was cornered, and in that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. Well, at least I didn't get my job because of who I know, he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. The studio fell silent. The cameras caught the shocked expressions of the crew members, their eyes darting between the host and his guest. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a powder keg, and the host had just lit the fuse. Leavitt's eyes flashed with anger, but she didn't lose her composure. She leaned forward, her voice steady and controlled. Are we really going there? Let's talk about merit. The host tried to interrupt, but Leavitt was on a roll. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was exposing a double standard that had plagued her and countless other young women in politics. I come from a small town in New Hampshire, Leavitt began, her voice gaining strength. Every step of my journey was earned through hard work and determination. She recounted her 2022 congressional campaign, where she won the Republican primary in New Hampshire's 1st District. Despite losing the general election, she had gained significant attention for her bold style and unwavering convictions. Do you think it was connections that got me through a grueling primary? Leavitt challenged. Or was it the countless hours I spent knocking on doors, listening to voters, and fighting for what I believe in? The host shifted uncomfortably. He hadn't expected this level of pushback, this raw display of passion and competence. Your comment reflects a broader issue in political media, she continued. Young women in politics often face skepticism about their qualifications. We're judged more harshly than our male counterparts, constantly having to prove ourselves in ways that men simply don't. Leavitt's words hung in the air, heavy with truth. The studio audience sat in rapt attention. They were witnessing more than just an interview. They were seeing a seismic shift in the power dynamic of political discourse. Did you know that studies show young women are often judged more harshly than their male peers in political settings? Leavitt asked, her tone now almost professorial. It creates a hostile environment, one where comments like yours are seen as acceptable, even expected. The host, realizing his mistake, attempted to backpedal, but Leavitt pressed on, her voice growing stronger with each point. You talk about connections, but let's discuss the real nepotism in politics, she said. Statistics show that many positions are filled based on connections rather than merit. But when women like me earn our positions through hard work, we're unfairly scrutinized. Meanwhile, male candidates often receive more leniency. Can you explain that double standard? The host's face had gone pale. He knew he had crossed a line, and Leavitt had just drawn an even bigger one. The tables had turned, and now it was the veteran broadcaster who found himself on the defensive. Leavitt leaned back, her gaze intense. I got my job the same way you did. Hard work. Or is that only admirable when it fits your narrative? The silence that followed was deafening. The host, for perhaps the first time in his career, was at a loss for words. He had come into this interview expecting to dominate a young, inexperienced guest. Instead, he found himself outmatched by a formidable opponent who had not only defended herself, but had exposed the very biases that plagued political discourse. The studio fell silent, but the air crackled with electricity. Karoline Leavitt's eyes locked onto the host, who was visibly scrambling for a lifeline. His usual swagger had evaporated, replaced by a nervous energy that was palpable even through the camera lens. This was it, the moment that would define the interview and potentially both of their careers. Leavitt leaned forward slightly, her posture a perfect blend of confidence and poise. She had weathered the storm of accusations and insinuations, and now it was her turn. The corners of her mouth turned up ever so slightly, not in a smile but in the knowing look of a chess player about to call checkmate. "You know what the difference is between you and me?" Her voice was calm, steady, but laden with an undercurrent of power that demanded attention. The host, perhaps sensing the shift in dynamics, took the bait. "What's that?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and trepidation. In one breath, she distilled the entire history of their clash into a single, defiant question. Leavitt's gaze never wavered as she delivered her response. "I'm not afraid of the truth. Are you?" 7 words. That's all it took. 7 words that hung in the air like a thunderclap, reverberating through the studio and beyond. The host's face told the whole story: shock, disbelief, and the dawning realization that he had just been outplayed on his own turf. In the control room, phones began to buzz incessantly. Screens lit up with notifications. Social media was exploding. The clip of Leavitt's response was spreading rapidly, racking up millions of views in minutes. This wasn't just another political interview. It was a seismic event reshaping the landscape of media discourse in real time. As the views climbed into the tens of millions, the fallout began. Sponsors started to pull their ads. The network's PR team went into overdrive, trying to control a narrative that had long since slipped from their grasp. But while the media world was in turmoil, Karoline Leavitt's star was rising. Her social media followers skyrocketed, with people from all walks of life praising her composure and courage. Young women in particular found in her a role model, someone who stood her ground in the face of intimidation and came out on top. The host, meanwhile, faced a reckoning. His reputation, built over years of hard-hitting interviews and scathing commentaries, was now under intense scrutiny. Clips of past interviews resurfaced, with viewers and pundits alike questioning whether his approach had always been more about bullying than truth-seeking. As Karoline Leavitt stepped out of the studio, her phone erupted with notifications. The clip had already gone viral, spreading across social media platforms like wildfire. Her heart raced, palms sweaty as she glanced at the screen. This wasn't just another political skirmish. It was a seismic event that would reshape the media landscape. The fallout was immediate and fierce. Within hours, the first domino fell. A major car manufacturer announced it was pulling its ads from the show. Then another sponsor followed suit, and another. By nightfall, the exodus was in full swing. Companies that had stood by the show for years were now distancing themselves, fearful of being associated with what many viewers saw as a blatant display of bias and disrespect. Social media exploded with debate. Hashtags supporting Leavitt trended worldwide, with many praising her poise and quick thinking. Others rallied behind the host, arguing that tough questions were part of the job. The divide wasn't just political, it cut across generational lines, with younger viewers overwhelmingly siding with Leavitt. As pressure mounted, the host issued a carefully worded non-apology that only fueled the controversy. "While I stand by my role as a journalist to ask tough questions," the statement read, "I recognize that the intensity of our exchange may have overshadowed the substance of our discussion." The backlash was immediate and fierce. Meanwhile, Leavitt's star was rising. Interview requests poured in from rival networks. Speaking engagements materialized out of thin air. Literary agents pitched book deals. The political landscape shifted overnight. Leavitt, already a rising star in conservative circles, was now being hailed as a symbol of a new generation of right-wing voices. Young conservatives saw in her a role model, someone who could go toe-to-toe with the media establishment and emerge victorious. Behind closed doors, the network was in crisis mode. Ratings for the show had plummeted, with viewers tuning out in droves. The host, once considered untouchable, was now a liability. 24 hours after the interview, the network announced a comprehensive review of the show's practices and policies. The implications were clear. The host's future hung in the balance. For Leavitt, the aftermath was a whirlwind of opportunities and challenges. Her social media following exploded, giving her a platform that rivaled established media figures. But with that came increased scrutiny. Every tweet, every public appearance was now dissected and analyzed. The incident sparked a broader conversation about media bias and the treatment of conservative voices in mainstream outlets. Think tanks published reports, academics weighed in, and news channels devoted hours of coverage to dissecting what had happened and what it meant for the future of political discourse. As the dust began to settle, one thing was clear. The media landscape had shifted. The old guard was on notice, and a new generation of voices was demanding to be heard. The aftermath of that single interview had set in motion changes that would reverberate through newsrooms and political offices for years to come. Karoline Leavitt's viral clapback sparked a seismic shift in the media landscape. Social media erupted with discussions about bias and accountability, turning viewers into active participants shaping the narrative. The ripple effects spread far and wide. Media literacy became a hot topic as people questioned everything they saw and heard on TV, demanding to know who was really pulling the strings. As the dust settled, Leavitt's stand emerged as a watershed moment for the future of media itself. The public's cry for change echoed through the industry, leaving one question lingering. In a world awash with half-truths, can one voice spark a revolution in accountability?